I'm delighted to be here to introduce Tony Marx. Although I must say, introducing Tony Marx to this group is a little bit like introducing the Pope to the College of Cardinals. It's a kind of a nice ceremony, but it's hardly necessary. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm delighted to be with you to introduce Tony Marx and to welcome him back to the Columbia campus. He will be the keynote speaker for this event. Organizational change and change management have become increasingly important to both companies and universities as they seek to improve productivity and performance with inspired and motivated employees. At Columbia, we are faced with the need to continually change and respond to issues such as online education, globalization, cross-disciplinary teaching and research, a wide range of issues. And I must say my experience as Provost suggests that issues that concern organizational change and how organizations change in culture and activity is a crucial element of the success of any organization and certainly of a university. One of the things I've found most surprising and interesting as a provost is how Columbia faculty, who are among the most innovative and creative of any group of people that you'd want to meet in the world, have become attached to the institution that allows them to be creative, so that when you talk about changes, they suddenly become much less creative and innovative than they might be in their own research. So organizational change for universities is a really important issue. Tony Marx was trained in political science. He's a former professor and director of undergraduate studies in political science here at Columbia. He knows these challenges well as past president of Amherst College and in his current position as president and CEO of the New York Public Library, which is undergoing, to put it mildly, a series of strategic changes. A native New Yorker who frequented the Inwood Library as a child, Tony Marx is a product of the city's public school system. He attended PS 98 and the Bronx High School of Science. He then studied at Wesleyan and Yale, graduating magna cum laude with a BA from Yale. He received an MPA from the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton and went on to earn MA and PhD degrees also at Princeton, where he studied with Albert Hirschman, the father of development economics. Marx also went to South Africa in the 1980s, working for a non-governmental organization to help found Kanya College, a South African secondary school that prepared more than 1,000 black students for university work. In 1990, shortly after receiving his PhD, Marx joined Columbia's political science department and spearheaded a number of secondary school initiatives. And it was also here where Marx met his wife, sociology professor and a dear colleague, Karen Barkey. As president of Amherst College from 2003 to 2011, Marx, a recipient of multiple fellowships and prize-winning author of 3 books, passionately promoted access to higher education for lower-income students. An article in the New York Times last year noted that by the time Marx left Amherst, it was, quote, being heralded as a beacon of change, offering a higher percentage of its student body financial aid than almost any other liberal arts college in America. In 2001, Marx was appointed president and CEO of the New York Public Library and is working to expand the library's essential role as a provider of free educational opportunities for all New Yorkers. He is doing this by focusing on increasing services to students, researchers, and scholars, beginning a partnership with the city's Department of Education to increase public school access to critical learning materials, improving educational programming in the New York Public Library's 87 neighborhood branches, and expanding public access to ebooks and other digital resources. These new directions involve working with many stakeholders inside and outside the library. Truly an incredible case study of organizational change. Dr. Marx is here today to give us his thoughts on organizational and strategic change and why we should feel good about it, too. Please join me in welcoming Tony Marx.
Well, John, thank you. That was too kind, and I guess I have nothing to say. while I was delighted and honored by Bruce and Professor Phillips and other colleagues' invitation to be here today, I was also amused by it. The notion that I am, in any sense, an expert at successful organizational change, I think, would be quickly made into a lie by any Google search you can do from your device. We are certainly in the midst of change at the library, and there is serious controversy around that, as I think there should be, to be honest. So let me dive in. I think the first thing to say is to acknowledge that there are different scales of change. I think the need for change is pervasive given the disruptive effects, the positively disruptive effects, for instance, of information technology, as well as the post-industrial world that we live in, as well as the global world, all of that. But institutions have different levels of engagement in change. So, as John described, I was actually described in the media as the revolutionary president of Amherst College. I suppose my last name had something to do with that. And the truth is, and while I'm very proud of what Amherst did in terms of almost tripling its low-income enrollment, shifting to really becoming the most select, the college that is now minority white American, very much all in the Columbia tradition, I note, of the Ivies, the standout success story in that regard, and did that while, but people said you're going to destroy the place, and, they worried that we'd lower selectivity. In fact, it went up because basic mathematics tells you if you broaden your pool, you can be more selective. People said we were going to destroy the goose that laid the golden egg, meaning donations. We raised more money than any college had because people were inspired by what we were doing, what the college was doing. The point of this story is not to rehearse Amherst, but to say what felt revolutionary at Amherst only did because of how conservative, to put it bluntly, an industry, elite higher education is, for all the obvious reasons that you know well. But the reality is the fundamentals of Amherst didn't change and shouldn't change, right? I mean, while the founders of the college might be surprised by the colors of the skin or the breadth of backgrounds and experiences of the student body, and probably some of the things being taught in the classroom as well, they wouldn't have been surprised by the basic model of education, residential, seminars, lectures, all of that didn't change. So that's one level of change, and it contrasts, I think, with the level of change that a library faces. Now, of course, we're not just talking any library here. I'm the president, so I use hyperbole, and Micah May, the director of strategy, corrects me. We all have our roles in this. But I think the biggest, certainly, Micah will let me say, the greatest library, public library in the world. Of course, anybody can say the greatest, but the largest circulating library in America, the most used research library possibly in the world, certainly in America. Together, incredible force in an industry that is in question. So when I told my then 16-year-old snarky son that we were leaving the president's mansion at Amherst, and he liked the president's mansion at Amherst, even better than faculty housing at Columbia. The first thing he said, without missing a beat, was, "Dad, you didn't get the memo that libraries are going out of business?" And nobody asked that about Amherst, right, or about Columbia, or any of the great institutions of higher education. So it's fundamental. If you're looking for a case study of change, we're smack in the middle of it. So let me just rehearse the three arenas in which we are engaged in that, and then I will turn to the question at hand. But just to give you some context, the 87 branches, including one that's in a Columbia building 2 blocks from here, never been used more, which is surprising to people. Everything, circulation, butts and seats, everything up 50% over the last 5 years or so. And that's amazing. But the model is a model that hasn't changed in 100 years since Andrew Carnegie established it. It's a passive model. It's a model of come in, take our books, use our space, use our quiet, talk to your librarians, whatever, and go, right? And we are in a transformation of that model to a proactive educational model that says all those things are good, but the city needs more than that. So, for instance, the easiest way to describe this is, for decades, 20 to 30,000 kids come into our branches after school every day, and for decades we basically did nothing with them other than keep them safe. That's stupid, in my opinion. So we have just launched what will become, I think, the largest after-school program in America. And because we got the kids, we got the space, we should help. Similarly, we are tenfold increasing English language instruction, sixfold increasing English computer skills training, and we're already the largest non-city provider in those arenas. And all of that, on the subject of challenges to change, when the budget that the city provides to pay for the circulating library has gone down roughly 18% in 5 years, right? So, need for transformation that is expensive at a moment when our resources have been completely, decimated to too close to the bone, right? That's bucket challenge number 1. Challenge number 2, the reason why my son had that snarky comment is everything's online or everything's going to be online, right? So the image of the library as physical repository is threatened in a way that it's never been before. And, this is real. I mean, I was with a group of curators yesterday who told me that the word curator comes from the root of to hold and protect. Well, those days are over, right? Yes, of course, we must hold and protect our physical, unique items, but actually we're in a world of exploding, getting the information out. And of course, that raises interesting questions about the role of a library, let alone the greatest library. So, just with Micah's help, we did manage to get the entire commercial publishing industry to let us lend books electronically for the first time. That was last year. Something Google couldn't achieve. I'd be happy to talk about how we did that, but we have to be front and center in the world of this transformation. We're now talking about how would we get everything we have online and navigable. We're talking about what role should the library play in the revolution of education electronically as a physical space where people can gather. I'd be delighted to talk about any of those challenges. And then, of course, the third bucket, the one I think Micah made reference to in a question before lunch, is the largest scale renovation in the history of the main building. So on the subject of change and managing change, lucky me, my first major facilities project in my career is the largest renovation of the most beloved building at the central crossroads of the media capital of the world. So, what's my sort of, at least, I started by saying, not an expert, trying my best, not a theoretician, in a room of people who are more expert and more theoretical. So, acknowledging that, let me make a few more general comments, and then I'd love to hear your questions and have a conversation. The The first thing to note is the territory in which change is discussed and created at the library is one of intense love and intense anger, which is a not uncommon, I suppose in some personal lives, combination, but a fairly powerful one. By that I mean everyone loves the library. It's like apple pie, right? And everyone loves a library that they have an image of from growing up, right? And nobody likes those images to change, right? It's sort of in our bone, right? And anger because for two reasons. One, the library hasn't been able to do everything that it's wanted to do because of the financial constraints of the last decades, and anger because we're talking about changing an institution at a moment in which, for instance, people who do education or research or writing for a living have never felt more threatened, right? The business model, if you write for a living, the business model is a very scary question at the moment in a way that it hasn't been for centuries. And here's the institution that you think should be most on your side by not changing, and here it is changing, right? So that combination of love and anger is the territory in which we operate. And the question is, how do you turn that around? How do you find or create a culture of trust that supports innovation? And here, again, my press will tell you that I should not pretend to be an expert at this, but I'm learning as I go. And I actually believe that may be the best way to go forward. So two things I would say are essential, and we sort of missed them at the library. One is you need to create or inform popular demand, right? You can't just assume that your customer base, your patron base, will understand the need for change in a way that, as a professional, bless you, that you will. You have to inform that and try to feed that demand so that it doesn't feel like change is being imposed, but actually change is being requested. And the second piece, I would say, also difficult for large institutions, is to listen and to not be defensive, but when you hear serious criticism, you have to be honest about what you're thinking about, which is always hard because you're not sure yet. And then you have to be willing to take the hits of people saying, no, that's a stupid idea for the following reasons. And in my experience, much of the time, they're right. Because actually, I believe in democracy. I believe that the wisdom of the collective is greater than the wisdom of any individual, certainly of myself. So you have to not be defensive. You have to listen and respond and adjust. And that's all part of a shift to a much more horizontal model rather than a top-down model. That's hard. It's hard for institutions to make that transition because you feel defensive, you feel imperial, you feel, correct, whatever it is. The media doesn't help because every time I admit mistakes, of course the media loves that. That's a great story. And that's okay. I will say, lastly, in my own defense, you need that horizontal input and direction and flexibility and communication, but you also need leadership because this is not an easy business, right? Change is hard, and you have to be willing to take the hits that come with that. And let's just say we're not all, that's hard psychologically. And I think institutions are not, even though we are at moments of inflection, particularly large established institutions don't readily go looking for change agents for leadership, right? I mean, I think, Columbia has been blessed with great leadership, the other institutions, but I think as a general pattern, there's a conservatism to that. Lastly, let me just say, can cultures change? Can impacted institutions change? Situations change? So I'm just going to go way back to the beginning of my career, right out of college. I lived in South Africa in the 1980s. If ever there was a place in the world, and that's why I was there, where people believed change, peaceful change, was impossible to imagine. And many people believed that any change was impossible to imagine, even though people were willing to die for that change. I learned two things. One, to put the fights for change of institutions like the ones I've been associated with in a context, because I've seen what life-threatening change means and what is worth, what difference it makes. And that I've seen it's possible even in the hardest of situations. And I would suggest that South Africa in the 1980s qualifies as just that. Let me stop there. I'd love to hear your questions, your counter-suggestions, and your criticisms.
You mentioned earlier that you've gotten the commercial publishing industry to make a significant change in their business practices. My name is Bruce Fern. I'm with IBM. And so that sounds like a good change story. Can you give us the version of that? What did you do? How did you get them to change?
When I arrived at the library, I was struck by two facts. One, the bottom quarter to a third of New York City depends on the public library to read because they can't or don't afford books, and that the vast majority of books were unavailable for us to lend electronically because the commercial publishing industry was scared to death, right? Talk about an industry that, no, I'll leave it at that. I was going to conjure a large bird, but never mind. Some of my best friends. I thought that was a very scary set of facts because it implied that a technology that should explode access to the world in the subject of change was actually going to take it away from the people who couldn't afford subscriptions, devices, what have you, right? And as someone who cares about democracy, being informed, citizenry that's informed, or a workforce that's informed, I thought, this is, a nightmare coming true. All right, I'll do this very fast. I started by going to the American Publishers Association, where they expected librarian, and I should tell you I am not a professional librarian. Micah trained me to always say that. They expected me to walk in and be a purist and say, I demand the right to lend any book, anytime, anywhere, infinite copies, instantly, right? And of course, the publishing industry could never allow that to happen. They would be dead the next minute. But that's what they thought the sort of purist library position was. And I just walked in and said, I'm not a purist, right? Nor do I actually want to put you out of business. I need publishers to produce great new works and pay authors. And I need authors to be paid so that there'll be more of them, right? I'm a pragmatist, so let's make a deal, right? And I can't make you all a deal because the Justice Department will be, the next phone call I will get. So I literally, I think, Mikey, you were there, I stood down and I said, I brought my business cards. The only time in my career I've ever brought my business cards anywhere. And I literally just sort of handed out my business cards to every publisher. And then we went, Mike and I went one by one. And basically the deals we struck, there were three components. One is it's licensing deals, right? So we buy the right to so we'll buy the right to this title to lend, right? And if more than 5 people are in the queue, at least that's our general formula, we'll buy another one, right? If it's not available, you have to wait. And when it's available, you get it for 2 weeks. And then like Mission Impossible, it disappears, right? And the basic argument we said to the publishers is, look, the people we need to get books to are not buying books from you. They can't afford it, right? We're buying books for them. We're the largest book public purchaser, amongst libraries probably in the world, I would think. The people like you in the room, you don't put up with the inconvenience of a library, I bet, in terms of the public library and waiting and 2 weeks, et cetera. Columbia's library has a whole lot less inconvenience, as I recall. So let's just divide the market, right? I'll take care of the poor folks. You get more sales. They will put up with the inconvenience because they always have, but I'll get them the books, right? That was step number one. Step number two, if a publisher said, but we make a lot of our money on the bestsellers, I would say, look, I've never been in the business, nor do I really want to be, with all due respect, in the business of ensuring that anyone can get a copy of the latest Danielle Steele novel in the first 3 weeks, right? I could spend my entire acquisition budget on that. My circulation numbers, the metric of success, would go through the roof, and that would be idiotic, right? So I said, look, you want to keep your bestsellers for 6 months? I'll buy a few copies. When you're ready, I'll take them, right? Not my priority. Make your money, right? And then lastly, they said, and we want to be sure that this is going to increase sales, not just to libraries, but we did something radical. So that same snarky son, his second comment after he sulked for an hour was, Dad, I've thought about it, you picked the only institution in the world, the only one that has zero revenue. So we've just changed that. So we now, if you come on our website and you want a book physically, if it's available, it's yours, go get it at the branch. If not, you wait. If you want it electronically, if it's available, you download it right then and there into any device. And if you, or you wait in the queue, and if you don't want to wait in the queue, there's a buy it now button, right? And we get a commission, right? And actually that moves sales into the publishers, or at least that's our hope. So those were the basic deals. We, in almost every instance, made them national deals. There's an interesting question of how we can help make them global deals, because there are countries that can't afford physical libraries at all, obviously. And that's just the beginning, right? That's just the beginning. Please.
Hi. Nancy Davini, also from IBM. Tony, thank you for your comments. Very, very interesting challenges that you have. One of my most vivid...
IBM's never had any challenges.
No. One of my most vivid memories of the library and being dropped at the library with my 4 brothers as a kid was the librarian telling us to be quiet. And it would seem to me that libraries have this great opportunity to actually foster dialogue, collaboration, conversation in a lot of arenas, whether that's face-to-face within your facilities or through online technology means. So what's going on in that arena?
So first, I do think we have a responsibility to preserve some quiet space because, people come to the library to do that, and that's a great thing. In fact, one of the things that's you come to the Rosemain Reading Room, which sort of looks like this room on steroids, right? I mean, it's fantastic. And every seat is filled. Every seat is filled. Everyone has a computer in front of them, mostly theirs, but if you don't have one, we'll lend you one. And very few people have our books in front of them, right? They're not coming to that room for the books. They're coming for the quiet and the inspiration and the sense of being in the company of other people doing this kind of work. Human nature isn't going to change, and actually the fact that we can do more on screen, I think, drives us to want to be together more. I actually think that's a fundamental, I'm not a sociologist, I'm married to one, but I think that's a fundamental driver. But there is no doubt that the library has to be the place where we can collaborate with each other, where we can talk to each other. I mean, one of the things that's striking to me is, and we haven't solved this yet, but you go into the Rosemain Reading Room, there are, 800 people in there. I'll put money down that there's 5 people working simultaneously on, the French Revolution or reform in China, and they don't have a clue that they're in the room together, right? I mean, that's just as the, low-hanging fruit, right? But we're using our spaces for that collaborative. We're designing spaces for that collaborative kinds of approaches. And I'll give you one particular example that I'm just fascinated by, and I don't know what to do, so if anybody has any ideas, let me know. The world of education is in revolution. The possibilities of what you can learn, from, the device in your pocket is unbelievable, right? And yet, what people want is not just to learn that way, again, passively. They want what's missing from screen, which is a chance to get together with other people who are learning the same thing, to have a discussion and a debate, maybe a seminar, right? This is flipping the classroom, right? They want to go to the expert librarian and say, that video I watched for 15 minutes, that was great, but I actually want to know more. What should I read? Curation is more important with more information available. IBM understands that. And it'd be nice to be tested to prove to employers or whoever that I've learned something. All of that is collaborative physical space, and it's a fascinating question to me. It's really at the top of my head of what should the role of a library be in that revolution, right? In providing that space and providing that expertise. And so, we're already a collaborative space. There may be possibilities for us to be much more powerfully so. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. As a change practitioner, as an agent of change, to listen to a leader that emulates many of the attributes that I'm trying to get many of my leaders to emulate, it's inspirational to hear you speak. So thank you for that.
You want to see the scars on my back?
I'll show you mine also.
We can compare scars. All right.
What have been your challenges and how you've solved for creating as much passion and commitment to the changes you're trying to drive to the middle manager level and to those individuals who report into you, both at Amherst and today? How do you create that so that the message and the intent and the vision isn't lost?
That's a great question. Next question. I said I wasn't an expert. In some ways, that's the hardest thing to do, right? And the most important. Funny how those go together. I think my instincts, which are not always the right ones, are to talk a lot, to sort of to explain and try to inspire, preach even. I actually think in the end that doesn't work. I mean, you got to do that, but you got to give those folks the opportunity to develop the ideas themselves and feel like they own it, right? Actually, in my experience, nothing in the world happens unless the people who are going to do it feel like they own it. In fact, feel like they invented it, right? And that's true for colleagues, it's true for donors, it's true for trustees, it's true for, God help me, the city council and the media and faculty from around the world who are a part of my constituency. So I think you have to find, and again, I have lots of good help on this, as many creative venues as you can to bring people together to say, here are our problems, right? So one of the tricks to change, and I'll just confess this, is you got to acknowledge the problems, right? That's also hard for big institutions, right? Because when I go around saying I've got the following 6 ridiculous problems, there are people who feel like I just insulted them, right? Who were there, right? Who did great work, but the problems are there, right? And my view is I can't solve problems if I don't acknowledge them. Because if I don't acknowledge them, I can't ask my colleagues of all constituencies, particularly sort of middle management folks, here's the problem, how should we solve it so that they help solve it and own the solutions. That said, let's be honest, there are self-interests at play. People who feel that their positions are threatened when change happens. I don't know, I haven't really found a magic solution to that. Though I will tell you this about the library is I'm endlessly impressed at how my colleagues throughout the system, we're talking roughly 2,000 staff, embrace the notion of change has to come, right? They understand that the world that libraries are front and center in has to change. They even understand that it will die if it doesn't change, right? Maybe that's helpful, actually, to understand that. Yes, sir.
Great talk, thank you. Just change conversation. So, may or may not have heard, we have a new mayor-elect.
Is that true?
Yeah. And in this row, you may have been accused of being a doppelganger. But anyways, what are your thoughts, or what are you anticipating? It's not been much of a secret that that the direction the mayor's race was headed. So, have you guys thought about how that will affect the libraries, and any thought there?
Yes. So the city, of which the mayor is the most powerful figure, obviously, it provides half the budget of the library, right? It's gone down, but it's half the budget, right? It's the equivalent of some billions of dollars of endowment, which we don't have, right? So yes, I spent a fair amount of time thinking about this, a fair amount of time talking, so I've gotten to know the mayor-elect. That process started long before he was even a candidate. That's good, right? One of the lessons of life is, you never know. Be nice to everybody, because you never know. I say this to my kids. Actually, I like him, and we have some interesting shared visions. But thinking about how I can create a coterie of people around me and around the library who can help with this relationship and to keep it, going. Sure, that has to be front and center. I think it's fair to guess that this mayor's priorities will be the branches in the poorest neighborhoods, and I'm pleased to say that's a priority for me. There'll be other issues where we'll have some harder conversations. That said, look, I have a fascinating perch to watch this change happening in this city, and it's amazing, right? I mean, people got real used to the sort of, who was in charge for 12 years and the relations around him. And, it's just wild to watch the change and the fear and the anger and the denial and the hope and the excitement and the maneuvering. Oh, it's the best theater in town. And yes, we have to be in the center of that. Do we have time for one more question, Bruce? If there is one. Wherever the microphone lands, I apologize, I'm not in charge.
Hi.
Another part of change management, yes.
Hi, Jack Angiolillo.
Hi, Jack.
Hi. I guess I
A
was
great Amherst graduate, see?
Yes. I guess I was wondering about Amherst. Since you've left, there have been a number of controversies and challenges. I guess the cancellation of the science building construction, the concern about student safety, and the turnover of faculty, or just the aging out of old faculty, and now it's 25% new in the last 2 years. And so I guess how has that informed your tenure at Amherst and given you guidance going forward with the library?
Well, actually, those three issues that you pull out were not sort of surprises, right? We knew we needed a new science center. This is a subject Columbia thinks a lot about. And we knew that was going to be hard and expensive. And, we worked at it. And when I left, we thought we had a possibility, but we didn't know enough about it. So unfortunately, I didn't have a choice but to leave it to my successor to finish the analysis and make that decision. And that's what she did. And I gather they've now found an alternative, and I've certainly been talking with her about that. The point is to make sure that we have a great science building and facilities for all of the educational programs at Amherst. The issues of student life, those never go away, including some really hard ones. And I think we understood that there was change that needed to happen, and we did some of that, and it's continuing. The last one, the faculty demography, that was like, we understood that one from the word go. You just need to, there is such a thing as mortality, right? Even for the gods of the faculty. Sorry. So we understood that, and that's why we created a whole set of systems to inform how to choose where to put those replacements that was systemic rather than, we had one of these, so we just need a new one of these, right? That's a lost opportunity to take a moment of challenge and turn it into an opportunity by saying, what is the collective direction that isn't just autopilot? Which is the more general point I will make, and then I think I'm going to be yanked off stage and back to the library. They're talking, so I have to go and shush them. In any institution of scale, there are always fires to put out, always. The danger is that you become a fireman, right, or firewoman, just putting out fires. And then the institution does not change, does not have a direction. The challenge is to say, what are the big structural forces at play, whether it's the demography of the faculty or a major facility that's dying and needs to be replaced, or anything else, or a disruption from information technology or what have you, and say, okay, how do we create a process that decides where we're headed and try to get there and accept that there will be some scars and, some unhappiness along the way. That's part of that process, too. It was at Amherst, as it is at the library, at any institution. I think, I believe fundamentally that we have no choice but to figure out how to do this together, not as expert lecturing, but together. Because otherwise the institutions that we love and that we need, for instance, to educate ourselves and to have the kind of society we want, will cease to function or cease to serve society in the way that they need to. And that's why I think the topic that you're all after, that you all are the experts on, and that I look forward to learning from your continued wisdom, is the essential one of the day. Whatever the institution is, whatever the mission or issue is, we have to figure out how to create cultures of change and how to make them work as well as they can, because otherwise, we won't have the institutions that we love and serving us in the way that we need them to. It's great to be with you all. Thank you so much.